Hi, I'm Zoe Starr, and welcome to my show, Paranormal Extraction. Wow, we've got a great thing to talk about that is like the biggest thing right now. But we have a new book out by Mark Ollie called Europe's Roswell 40 Years Since Impact. Okay, and you can find this book on Amazon, and oh my God, it's incredible. There's evidence inside too. We're going to talk about all this good stuff. But we have Mark on today, who's one of my favorites, okay? He is just absolutely amazing. He knows about everything. He is well known, very well known in the UK. He's up and coming in the USA, or let's not even say up and coming anymore, because he's done shows for Ancient Aliens, and you're going to see all of those shows on the new episodes coming out. So is he famous? I would have to say so. Now, besides that, besides him being, on TV or writing his books, he's an author of many, many books, okay, not just this book, but he's also a TV producer, okay, a lecturer, a musician, and the list goes on and on and on. Archaeologist, let's put that in there too. Highly intelligent, amazing person. So I hope you guys all enjoy this interview today. This is a hot topic, and I am really excited that Mark came out with this new book, and it is going to be, if it hasn't already, the bestseller. Wow, what a hot topic this is, Mark, and congratulations on writing this book. I mean, how did you come across, as well as how did you come across finding this evidence? I just need to know everything, because this is like the Europe's Roswell. We have Roswell, New Mexico, okay, but this is Europe's Roswell. So tell me about this. Like, what brought you to write this book, and how did you find this?
Okay, it sort of happened almost by accident. If you go back to the beginning of the 2000s, I was invited to speak at a UFO conference called Probe that used to happen up in Blackpool. I mean, people in this country have very fond memories of it. We miss it. It was going for about 30 odd years. And I went there as a speaker because I've had a couple of encounters with flying craft of my own. So it was of interest to me. I think actually I was doing an archaeological subject for them relating to paranormal and what have you. But anyway, I ended up meeting a guy there called Gary Rowe. And Gary Rowe, at this point, he's like the previous generation of speakers to me. He's older than me.
Okay.
Um, and we sort of hit it off. It's quite strange because here's me covered in hair looking like a hippie, and there's him in a suit and tie guy. You know what I mean? It was bound to end up going that way. We end
You're
up
so funny.
yeah, we
Yeah.
end up sitting either side of a table in a curry house in Blackpool, chatting about the paranormal. Both of us equally interested in that sort of thing. And right at the very end, over a beer, he kind of leaned over and he said, "I need to speak to you again." He said, "Because I know you're doing television and stuff, and I've got an interesting case I want you to look into." And I'm like, "Yeah, fine, okay." And there's probably somewhere like 2003, 2004, something like that. So anyway,
Sure.
I don't hear anything for a year. And then eventually the phone goes and Gary phones me and he says, "Well, the case I've got is a UFO crash in Wales." Now, I don't live a million miles away from Wales. I'm sort of next door to it. I'm on the English side. And the other side of the border where this took place is not very
Mhm.
far away. Um, and he says, "Do you want to come and investigate?" Now, the first thing that flashed across my mind as an archaeologist, when a Spitfire crashes into the ground and you have to dig it up, it like hits the deck at 600 miles an hour and it plants itself into the ground. So I'm thinking, hey, I'm in here. I can get in with the shovels, dig it out. And I've got visions of, big disc alien bodies hanging out of it. Well, that's immediately that's what everybody thinks of. And then Gary sort of backs up a bit and he says, "No," he said, that's not quite what happened here. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." He said, "Well, I don't think there's going to be any crash ship there or anything like that." And then he says, "Well, but I have got some pieces of it." At which point, as an archaeologist, I'm like, physical evidence. I can deal with
Yeah.
physical evidence. And as a documentary maker as well, that was of interest to me. He said, yeah, he said, I've got them in a case in my shed. And I'm like, really? Okay.
Oh my
Or he might, he
gosh.
might, he might have said garage or whatever. And I'm like, okay, we need to talk a bit more about this. And that's where the whole case came about, really, was from that. Do you want me to crack on with the rest of the story?
Well, absolutely, because I mean, okay, so he gives you these pieces, and then what does he do? Does he, okay, so you go to the location, or like, how did you like narrow this down that, what
Well,
happened?
it was a little bit easier than that in the end because what Gary wanted me to do was to do a documentary to cover the whole case. So
Wow.
it was definitely a case of getting in a vehicle and driving down there. Also, by coincidence, at this point, it was 25 years since this crash occurred because the crash actually occurred at the beginning of January, in the first few days of January 1983. So this now
Wow.
is in, of course, this is in the early 2000s now. So Gary's like, well, okay, you need to go down, you need to have a look at the site, you need to investigate. He said, but you're not likely, based on the story, to find very much to do with the actual crash. And I said, oh, why is that? Anyway, this is the story. He said, there's a farmer called Irwell Evans went out to have a look at his sheep in the early hours of a January morning. And he said, when he got to his fields, there's about 4 fields covered in debris. He said it looked like a
Wow.
full on plane crash. You're talking about 6 foot, 2 meter sheets of metal everywhere, tin foil, some little bits of structure, but not many. So Irwell, of course, is a bit concerned at this point. So he phones the local police and he says, I think I've had a plane crash. So the police say, okay, hang on a minute, we'll have a word with the local Air Force base. They phone the local Air Force base. Anyway, cutting a long story short, a couple of hours later, a crash recovery team from the Air Force base turns up in Irwell's fields and they start picking all of this debris up and clearing it all away. And Irwell said it was like a scene from the James Bond movie. He said the early hours of January, the sun is sort of fading and they've got all these floodlights out.
Oh
And
my God.
he said there were uniformed police officers there and they were involved in it. He said there was Air Force personnel and uniformed Air Force personnel. And he said there was also some guys in suits that were ordering all these people around.
Unreal.
So, straight away you think government, men in black,
Oh
cover
yeah.
up and all that, yeah.
Sure.
So that's right in the beginning. So eventually this farmer has to go to bed because he's up the next day, obviously, to carry on farming, which is what he does. So he leaves them all to it, probably around midnight. He gets up the following day, goes back to the fields. He said they'd completely cleared the fields. There was just nothing. It was like the crash had never happened until he
Wow.
until he noticed that when he looked at the woods, because there was some woodland at the side of his field, he said you could see this cutting through the top of the trees,
Oh my
where
gosh.
this thing had obviously come down. It had hit the trees. It had
Yeah.
snapped them all, scattered everything across the fields. There was timber and whatnot everywhere. And but the thing was, it had flown off. So that
What?
yeah, what vehicle is around at that time that can lose that amount of debris and then still fly off? So
How do you know that it flew off? I mean, so there's all this
well, it,
debris. How did you know
it
that it took off and it wasn't there?
because it literally wasn't there. At no point did anybody ever
Oh,
find
oh, he,
anything. No engines, no fuselage, no cockpit, no
okay.
pilots. No
So just
fuel
like it
tanks.
hit the ground and left a bunch of stuff there,
Well, it hit the trees.
and then the
It was
debris started falling off of it, whatever
yeah.
it hit, and then it
Well,
just kind of went down and went back up then.
yeah, what we think happened, what we actually think happened is that whatever type of vehicle it wasn't designed to go at low speed and low pressure and to take small impacts, which is what you get when you get into the tops of trees. You get all these impacts hitting the bottom of it. When it's flying at, whatever, subsonic or supersonic speeds or whatever it does, fine, no problem at all. The pressure keeps the whole thing together. But when it has to slow down because it's being hit by objects, this material just breaks up like eggshell. So
Yeah.
basically, all the underneath of this thing just got smashed off and it vanished. Anyway, next part of the story. This is how Gary gets involved. About 2 weeks later, back in the 1980s, he gets a newspaper clipping from a newspaper clipping agency, which is how information used to travel back then. Because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have mobile phones,
Yeah, you
none of
mean
that.
we're old?
Yeah, yeah, basically, just for the younger listeners
Yeah,
out
yeah.
there, so basically, he gets this newspaper clipping, and it says strange debris from out of the sky. 23rd of January 1983, this comes out in a national newspaper called the Sunday Express. So then Gary reads the story, and it's basically what I've just told you now. And he looks at it and he goes, Irwell Evans. He said, I know Irwell because Gary lives in Wales,
The
so he doesn't live a
farmer.
million miles away. Yeah, he knows the farmer. So he
Wow.
phones, he phones the farmer and he says, Irwell, can I come down and have a look? I want to see this. And Irwell's like, yeah, I don't think you'll find anything, but come and have a look. Now, Gary at this point is running the local UFO group. So him and a couple of these mates go piling down there to this farm. Nothing, absolutely nothing on the fields. But then Gary thinks, hang on a minute, if I get into the woods, there's no way when it's going dark, using floodlights, that they're going to get all the pieces of material out
Right.
of the forest. So he
Right.
dives into the woods with him and his mates, and he gets about 8 or 10 fragments. He gets at least 6 pieces of metal, some of which are stuck into trees, and 2 pieces of this aluminium foil, or at least he thinks it's aluminium foil, but they're in blocks. The pieces, the fragments, are like blocks of honeycomb. So it's not something he's ever seen before. Anyway, he makes arrangement with the farmer and he says, can we come back in a week or two? Metal detectors. The farmer's like, yeah, fine. So they go back, nothing. They don't find anything at all on the second visit. So Gary says, okay, we'll come back a third time and we'll bring proper technology. We'll see what we can find. We'll have a really, really good look for this. And then all of a sudden, Gary gets a phone call off the farmer, and the farmer says, you're not going to believe this. They're removing the forest. They're demolishing it. They're cutting it down.
Oh my
So
God.
Gary's like, okay. So he phones the local forestry commission, and the guy on the other end, Gary says, why are you taking it away? The guy on the other end says, oh, it's wind damage. And
Oh my gosh.
Gary's like, do you normally take a woods away for wind damage? And the guy at the other end's like, no, but in this case, that's what we're doing. And basically, they stripped
Amazing.
the whole woods away and they bulldozed the whole thing flat. So by the time I got there, because you're looking at now 2007, 2008, there's nothing. I mean, when I finished the documentary, people have said, why didn't you put the crash site in the documentary? Well, early on in the documentary, it's about the second or third shot. There's a panning shot of white sheep on white snow in a white snowstorm against a white sky. And it's this panning shot of these 4 fields. And it just doesn't look like anything. It's probably the worst piece of footage you could possibly hope to put in anything. And there's nothing there. It's one of the similarities with Roswell is that actually where the crash there took place was a place called Corona, but the nearest big town that you can put a pin in is Roswell. Well, it's the same thing here in Wales. It's about a mile or two outside of the village of
Uh-huh.
Llanilla, which is the nearest place you can put a pin in. So you're looking at the same kind of situation, really. Yeah, so that kind of brought us up to the documentary.
Right. Okay. So this farmer, okay, so he's out there, he tells you guys that the trees have been cleared. How did this lead more into the documentary? I mean, was it because of the fragments of these pieces, or what evidence is there besides his word? Was it the
Yeah,
pieces?
yeah, really good question because the thing that's always struck us with this case is that you're going backwards because you're starting at the end. You're
Yeah.
starting with the fragments, you're starting with the story, you're starting with all of that, and you've got to work backwards. You literally have to go backwards to try and find out what's going on. So in 2008, we asked exactly the same question, and it led us to a guy called Andrew Chapman, who was the guy who wrote the newspaper article because again, in common with Roswell, Roswell had there was a newspaper article on the day of the Roswell incident, and then there was one the following day in the Roswell Daily Record, and then that was it.
Yeah,
That's
how did they
cover up after
cover
that.
that up? Did they cover that up like
Well, they
Roswell?
did. Yeah. Well, they did the same thing over here. There's only
Oh,
one newspaper article, and that's the one in the Sunday Express. That's it. No local papers covered it. No other national papers covered it. There's only that one article. So we went to Andrew Chapman, who's the guy who wrote it, and he's a really sharp journalist guy. And he said, "Right, leave this with me." He said, "Because I've still got the notepads going all the way back into the 80s, and I'll go back and I'll find out."
wow, that's great.
Yeah, he said, "I'll find out where this story came from." Well, that's what we thought. So 3 days later, he phones back and he says, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "I've got absolutely no idea where I got that story from." He said, "I've got it in my notebooks." And he said, "I know I got it." He said, "We came back off the New Year break, so it must have been like 3rd, 4th, 5th of January or whenever." And he said, "Somebody must have come round the
Yeah,
office
they
handing out
stole it. They
stories,
stole it.
yeah, they've come around the office handing out stories to be written up." He said, "So I've got no idea where it comes from." So in the book I've just written, I have to guess. I'm guessing it's either someone on the police recovery thing, someone on the Air Force recovery thing, or it's a local journalist that's passed the story on. Because some of the details don't match what Irwell remembers. In the newspaper article, I think it mentions a girder with some writing on it. It mentions an aerial and a few other bits and bobs, but Irwell doesn't remember seeing any of those. So it's not come from him; it's come from somewhere else. So that really got us into the mystery. So at that point, that's what we had. So we made the documentary called Europe's Roswell. That was out in 2008 for the 25th anniversary. Of course, now
Wow.
it's 40. It's 40 years since impact. So you've had the documentary. Now you're getting the book.
Wow. Okay. So tell me about the fragments. Okay. So he's got these fragments. I want to know if they've been tested. I
Well,
want to know that stuff.
okay. Well, the good news is, and this is the good news for everybody, the book itself is what I call show and tell. So you're not going to be buying a book that's all words and no substance. It's
Well,
a
not from
straight.
you. You're an archaeologist.
Well, I'll kind of I'll prove the point. Here we go. Show and tell. There you go. That's the debris. A massive, great big photograph of it there. There's loads and loads.
That,
You can see it.
yeah,
There's loads of photographs like that, full page, full on. You literally you get to see
yeah.
it all.
In
So
in the book and the two
yeah,
pieces that you sent to me. So they
yeah,
were kind of
yeah.
like smaller pieces.
Yes, they're
Uh,
smaller fragments.
okay.
Let's. I'll try and answer your question about tests and stuff. So, but like I say, the book show and tell. When I was putting that together for Philip Mantle at Flying Disc Press, when I was doing it, Philip's, he's a great UFO investigator,
Yeah.
and he did exactly what you've just done, and he asked the important question. He said, "Do you think that Gary would part with any of this material?"
Oh,
Which
yeah.
because Gary's protected it. You've got to remember this. He's had this material 40 years.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like it's got to be somewhere where no one can get to and no one can know about.
Yeah, he doesn't keep it at home. In fact, let me just jump in before I give you the analysis. It's an interesting story because some point in the February of 83, he got a knock on his door and he's heading for the front door and he can see this outline of two guys stood outside the front door dressed in black. So he
Oh,
opens the front door and sure enough, two men in black,
yep.
hats, glasses, incomprehensible passes, dark suits, ties. So Gary looks up the close where he lives, and there's two SUVs with all the windows blacked out and no number
Yeah.
plates.
Yeah.
And these two guys basically say to Gary, they say, "Look, can we have our metal? Can we have our material back, please?" And
Uh-huh.
Gary looks him straight in the face and he goes, "No." And of course, these guys are like, "Why? Why can't we have it back?" And Gary says, "I'll tell you what I've done." He said, "I got hold of one of these bits of metal." He said, "I've broken it up into 100 tiny fragments." He said, "I've put them into key rings and I've given them out to all my mates in the media." He said,
Oh.
"So these key rings are out there." I mean, he's a genius. Gary is an absolute genius. He's like, "They're already out there." He said, and he said, "If you ever come knocking on my front door again," he said, "I'm going to phone all of these people up and tell them to hand that stuff over to the media." So these guys are just like, "Well, that's it. Game over. The cat's out of the
Wow.
bag." And they just walked off in silence, got into the SUVs and drove off, never to be seen again. So the men in black, I mean, something that tells you as well is they must have been watching the woods and the crash
Oh, of
site
course.
because they knew he'd got some of the material.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
they knew where he lived. They went and found him. You know
Yeah,
what
of
I mean?
course
So
they always do. He's lucky he
there
didn't
you
get
go.
killed.
Right. So anyway, back onto the story again. That's a huge digression there. Back onto the basic story, the analysis side of it. So Philip, anyway, I said to Philip, I said, chances are he won't let any of this stuff go. Not now. So
Yeah.
Philip messages Gary, and then he doesn't really hear anything for about a week or so. So the pair of us are like, well, clearly we're not going anywhere with this. And then all of a sudden, he gets a jiffy bag in the post with 3 pieces of debris in from
What?
Gary. So we're like, this is amazing. We can test it. We can do something with
Wow.
this. So going back to your analysis, this is all important stuff. We're really moving on now. The analysis, Gary had already given a piece of this to the big aerospace company over here, British Aerospace. He'd run it past a couple of people involved in restoring planes. He'd talked to people involved in making planes back in the 80s, and he'd passed it on to British Aerospace. So all of us are referring to that now as the UK analysis. And the UK analysis came back. It was about a 12-page document on A4, and it came back, and basically what it said is, we don't know what the grey stuff is, we don't know what the green rubbery hexagonal stuff is, but the metal is duralumin. Now, duralumin is quite common. It appears in fighter aircraft. It even goes back to airships in the First and Second World War. So it's knocking around quite a bit, this duralumin. But what British Aerospace did say, they said it's a pure alloy and it's of a type that we've never seen before. And if you can find out who's making this stuff, or whatever, it's something we'd like to really like to look into. And they sent all the samples back just to give you continuity. And that's the end of the UK analysis. So fast forward to now, and now, of course, they have better analytical technology. They've got better knowledge of what's going on. So we've got these little tiny fragments. So what Philip says is, he says, let's do a blind test. Let's send one of these fragments off to Australia to a lab there, and we'll send another fragment off to
Fantastic.
the United States. Yeah, so absolutely spot on. So we did it the right way. The one that went off to Australia, that came back first after about 3 or 4 weeks. Because you've got to bear in mind at this point, we're holding up the publication of the book because we want to know.
Yes.
Should have been out in January, and this is catapulting us to a 1st of November release now.
Yeah, exactly.
It has to come out in 2023 because that's 40 years. So
Anyway,
back comes the Australian analysis. The first thing it says in the report is it's not duralumin. So we're like, okay, well, that's a start. They say it's actually aluminium foam. So we're a bit like, okay.
What is aluminium bone?
Exactly. What is it? What incarnation is that? Well, apparently you can get aluminium, you can get it to react with certain other materials, and it foams up and then goes solid at room temperature. And what you're left with then is a material that is extremely strong and extremely light. And I think that might have been one of the photos I sent you. Might have been that.
Yeah.
And that's what the Australians said. But then further down in the report, they say, and we think that this grey stuff is a certain type of American glue. And basically, you've got green paint on one of these surfaces. We don't know what this paint is. British Aerospace had already said the paint was non-aerodynamic. So they said, but it's one of ours. Quite clearly, this is something made on Earth. So me and Philip are like, oh, well, that's the end of that. Wait for it, though. Then the American analysis comes back. And as soon as you open the American one, it says, material, unknown.
How could you get like 2 totally different opinions from...
Right, well, that wait till I get into it, because the American one's quite different. But it's a lesson in assumption. Don't assume anything, because as it turns out, there are 3 different materials involved in this. There's the aluminium sheet metal stuff with honeycombs in it that might turn out not to be aluminium, because we never got that tested. There's a flat type of metal that has grey resin on one side and green paint on the other, that's one type of metal. That turns out that that probably is something to do with aluminium. And then there's another type of metal with the same grey resin on one side, but with these thousands of tiny hexagons, green hexagons all over one of the surfaces. Now that is the American stuff, and it turns out it's lanthanum or lanthanum. Now, it's called an exotic metal. And the reason it's called an exotic metal is because it's absolutely impossible to get it out of the ground. It's really difficult to mine. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this stuff out. It's not a common material in terms of us being able to make use of it. But it's everywhere. It's all over the place. It's up there with like quartz and lead and iron, and it's number 27 in the list of most common materials on planet Earth.
Oh, wow.
But it's also in meteorites, asteroids, it's in the galaxies, it's in the other planets, it's in the upper atmosphere, it's everywhere. Okay.
Wow.
So now we've got this really interesting. I mean, it's like 94.6% pure lanthanum. So it's really that is amazing stuff. And the glue, as the glue quotes unquote, turns out not to be American at all because they haven't got the foggiest idea what this grey resin is. So clearly the Australians were wrong. They were making assumptions. So there's an inconsistency there. So you've got at least three different types of material that we've got, two of which now have been professionally analysed. The detailed analysis has gone into the book. It's gone in as the final appendix. And the only thing we've taken off is the story, because obviously the story that was in the report is the same as the book. The analysis has gone in full. You've got the full, both analyses
Right.
are in there so that people can have a look at that and make decisions for themselves. But the punchline, because I suppose that's to be a punchline to this, well, there always is, isn't there? Is it one of theirs? Is it one of ours? Or is it something in between that's been
Wow.
engineered?
That's
Because the punchline is none of this, nothing that we're talking about now apparently, existed in 1983.
wow. Okay, there's the punchline.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So there's me and Philip, publisher and author, and we're both thinking, yeah, we'll get the analysis back. This will sort this out, put it to bed, no more problems, this will solve everything. And all it's done is just dug the rabbit hole deeper. We've just gone deeper,
oh my God.
We're still not at the end of it, we're still not there yet.
Unbelievable. Okay. So I know that, I mean, we had talked before about when this book was coming out. And then all of a sudden you tripped upon this evidence thing. So it was kind of held off. So you guys could put this in the book. And so now where you guys are at with it is like, wow. Okay. So they didn't make this back then. So where are you going to go with it now? I mean,
right. Okay. I can feel because we've done this so many times before and it's Christmas. I can feel an exclusive coming on, so I hope you're ready for this.
yeah. Wow.
Okay, here we go. Let's go to the next level.
Okay.
I mean,
this isn't in the book yet.
It's not anywhere yet.
Oh no!
Okay, here it comes. Because let's face it, we've just talked ourselves up to November. So the book comes out on the 1st of November. That's it. Now it's in print and it's out there. So what's in the book? I've got to say this, it's complete. It's complete in itself. That's the basis that we're moving forward on. But there is a passing reference in the book to a Freedom of Information application that we got a friend of ours to make to the local airbase. Now, in the book, it quite rightly says that sort of fell on deaf ears. That we sent the application in, we asked lots of specific questions, and the MOD wrote back and they basically said, nothing to do with us, we haven't got the foggiest idea what's going on, and it wasn't the local airbase. At which point we're all like, okay. Then, and this is the next step, just at the end of the Freedom of Information Act, it says, but there are at least 3 other air bases and facilities in that area that you can write to and ask about this
Excellent.
issue. So,
Wow.
from Philip Mantle's point of view, the next step as a publisher is for him to continue to pursue the freedom of information. He can do it with a lot more, authority and wallop than I can.
Sure.
So that's what he's going to do. So,
Oh, this is
watch,
awesome. So this is
yeah, watch
continuing
this
on.
space. Well, and it continues further than this as well. So watch this space for that side of things because that's going to be moving forward. Um, and then the other question was, okay, now we know what we've got. So it's worth me putting a description in here because there's no description. We haven't reached a proper conclusion of how this stuff works in the book. So the description is fairly new. This is something I'm putting together for the Awakening Conference in February up in Bolton. So what we decided, basically, imagine you're looking at a sandwich, you're looking at, or in your case, maybe a burger, which is made up of layers.
No, I prefer a sandwich.
Sandwich, okay. So we're not going to go with like bun, lettuce, onion, sauce, tomato, burger, bun, But if you kind of think in those terms, then what you've basically got is the paint, the green paint, which is non-aerodynamic. That must be on the inside of whatever it's come off, because it clearly isn't going to work if it's on the outside. So you've got the green layer. This is the paint, and then you've got aluminium foam. So that's your metal.
Yes.
And then under that, you've got the grey resin, which is obviously some kind of adhesive, but we don't know what it is. So there's your first piece of metal. So that's your inside shell. The next bit, which is in the core, right? Okay, this is the core of the craft. It's the aluminium foil stuff. That's what we're calling it, the honeycomb foil. And there's a couple of pieces, which you can see in the book. That's the core. And then once you get through that, the next thing is another layer of resin, because that's the thing that glues the metal to it. The next bit of metal, which is the next layer, is your lanthanum, your lanthanum. So that's that's the outside shell, if you like. And then stuck on the outside of that are these thousands, if not millions, of little green hexagons.
Yeah.
That's that. So what you've got now is you've actually got the shell. You've got the structure there of whatever this craft was. Now then, there's a good reason why I'm telling you this. Once you know that that's the structure, you can then take it a step further, because you can then go off to the aerospace and military and you can say, what is it? What is this?
Yeah.
We've clearly got something here.
Yeah.
This is what it is. And little details like in the final report, which is in the book, it says, when we tried to photograph the lanthanum, it still carried some kind of electricity, some kind of charge or something, and it pushed back. So actually, I think I did send you this photo. It's got interference on the photo. It's extremely difficult to get an image of lanthanum. So if you wanted to do something on the outside of a vehicle, it's an amazing material to use, and you're looking at millions of dollars. So clearly, this is some kind of amazing craft, this thing that we're dealing with. Anyway, so we have gone to people who develop and build vehicles, flying vehicles for the military. And we've taken this, design, if you like, what we've got, and we've said, is this one of yours? Now, the initial reaction, I can say the initial reaction is a little bit kind of lukewarm. They're kind of saying,
well, yeah, of course. I'm surprised. I'm surprised you've gotten this far.
Well, I am, to be honest. I'm quite surprised. But all I can say is we've still got, things out there. There's still feelers out there. And again, it still isn't going to answer the essential question. Is it one of theirs? Is it one of ours? Or is it back engineered? Because certainly, this is the kicker, the lanthanum thing, that doesn't appear anywhere. That's nowhere. Nobody's commenting on that. You can talk about aluminium till the cows come home. It doesn't matter what kind of aluminium it is, they just don't care. But when you start to say, oh, by the way, the outside shell is, lanthanum, wham, that's it. Everything just goes completely dead and silent. And that is the most exotic, alien, strange material that you could imagine. It's really odd. It's not in the periodic table. It's in the new bit, It's in the add-on bit of the periodic table. It's that recent to discover that it exists. So clearly, that is going to be a major line of enquiry. So again, what I would say is, if people want to get involved in this as an ongoing case, buy the book. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hot. It's really hot stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
what you're telling me, I haven't heard from, excuse me, anybody else. Okay.
well, it
They
goes
have their
even further.
story, but this, from the
Yeah.
last time I talked to you, this is like turned into like a huge
Well,
thing.
do you want me to go bigger again? Let's go bigger again, because this is
Oh
where it
my
gets
God, you're going to blow
this
my
is where it gets
mind.
really exciting,
You
and your
guys have
American
done
listeners
a
are going to love this.
fantastic job on this. I mean, this is just amazing.
Well, about 3 weeks before the book went into print,
Oh no.
Philip Philip got sent. Yeah, Philip got sent a photograph. Right now, it's only a very brief, low quality photograph, and it's of
Sure.
a piece of that honeycomb foil. And it's identical. You can put the two pieces together and you go, yeah, that definitely looks like it came off the same thing. The only thing is, though, that piece of foil that the photograph shows you was found by a metal detectorist on the crash site at Roswell.
What? Okay, now my mind is absolutely blown.
So the way it currently looks now,
Oh
okay,
my
the way it
God.
currently looks, whatever it was that we covered with similarities to Roswell in 1983, and the similarities are listed in the book, whatever it was we covered there looks to be the same thing that came down in Roswell, New Mexico. So
Wow.
the little tiny beads of metal that they couldn't identify
Yeah.
back then, when it was excavated in the 1990s by National Geographic, the little beads of metal that the archaeologists found out there, I'm going to take a stab at the fact that that's going to turn out to be lanthanum or lanthanum, because the similarities between the two now, it's gone beyond, as it were, the playbook. You know, I mean, they treated that crash at Roswell the same way that they treated the crash here in Wales. There's about 3 or 4 pages of similarities in the book, which Gary put together. But now it's gone further, that it's starting to look like there are physical, evidential similarities between the two.
Wow, this is
So,
so awesome.
well, it's all exclusive stuff. It's your Christmas show, so I'm going to give
Well,
it to
I
you.
appreciate it, Mark. I'm so glad we're such good friends. I
Yeah,
mean, because you blow my mind every time you come on. I mean, but this is the topper of all of
yeah.
everything you've talked to before, and you and Philip. I mean, this is just absolutely amazing, and it's in your book. Okay,
Most of it, the vast majority of
right.
what I'm
So
telling you,
you're gonna have
is in
to
there.
do another book on it.
Well, what's planned is the freedom of information. I think that one is going to be very straightforward. And I think what we'll do with that is, at some point next year, probably around about February, I think we'll put a press release out about the freedom of information, because that one is very, very pertinent to the UK. That's important to hear, because we're dealing with the MOD here. So wherever that particular thread takes us, we'll put that out as a story, as a separate story. The other side of it, the military and I'll say it, the military and the analytical side of it, that side, that is going to warrant something coming out, something being released next year, probably in the middle of the year. I
Excellent.
can't imagine we're going to get the results, the final results back that quickly.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Right.
but so this is it. Okay, let's look at all three final scenarios in detail. Let's assume that it's one of ours. Let's assume that it's, man-made military technology. Well, for a start, nobody knows it exists. It's top secret. It should not have been flying around in the skies in the early 80s, because
No.
that means they've been developing it since at least the 1970s, and nobody's ever heard of anything like this being around as long ago as that. But
Right.
the consequences could be that something very similar to that was flying around after the Second World War. So now you're into this Operation Paperclip, you're into the Nazi technology, you're into, what were people doing at the end of the Second World War,
Yeah,
and then
yeah. That's
and
a
then you've and
yes.
then you've got the similarities with Roswell. What was it
Yes.
that crashed at Roswell? So
Oh my
that's
God.
one of your alternatives. So let's go down that route. The other alternative, you could see where this thing had hit the trees. It was about 25 foot wide. Now, 20 to 25 foot is the wrong dimensions for an aeroplane, and also it's wrong for a drone. I mean, if a drone hit trees, you'd end up with all of it over the fields,
Right.
not just bits, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so it speaks to this thing being an alien shape. The material,
Just
the lanthanum, is alien material, and it exists everywhere, all over the place. And the basic technology that we do understand looks like this thing could travel at incredible speeds. It was probably pressurized. It might have been designed to travel in time and space. It could be interdimensional. Who knows what this thing was capable of? In which case, it's alien. So, okay, that's option number two.
okay.
And in box number three, if you push that one to its conclusion, was it an alien craft that crashed at Roswell? We got hold of the technology, and did we back engineer it so that we were flying versions of our own as long ago as the late 70s, early 80s? Now that's your middle, that's your third option. Now, if that's the option, then you're actually knocking at the door of disclosure. You're at the
Yes.
position now where you're saying to everybody, you're saying to the military, you're saying to the politicians and people out there, come on, lads, tell us what this is, because we've actually got it. We can wave a piece of this stuff around, and we know it exists.
This is the perfect timing for this to be
Exactly.
out with everything is going on.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, this is coming out of the woodwork, so this is going to be like some fantastic stuff you've got here at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, we're not exactly kicking in the door of disclosure. We've not gone that far, but I think we're certainly scratching at it, if not knocking at it. Basically, we're saying to the authorities, "Come on, the cat's out the bag." We've got bits of this, so at the very least, you can tell us what it is, and hopefully, you'll tell us where the hell it comes from.
I think this is so awesome. I think this is so awesome, and everybody out there, you got to read the book, because everything is going to be in this book that we talked about. All right. It's not just him telling his story. Mark's an archaeologist, and you're talking about dealing with Phil, okay, who's extremely well known in the UFO community. So you have two people that are highly, highly regarded in the subject matter, and this is no joke. So if you want to know the real stuff, I want them to go on Amazon and get your book.
Well, the best part of it is we don't take no for an answer.
Mark, it's always great having you on, and I look forward to finding out more and more and more. You're going to have to keep me informed. Now, I know we're doing something in February. It's not about this, so right?
No, we're not.
Okay.
But while it's you, I might give you an update. Okay, so
if we don't know.
Tune in February, yeah. Well, it depends what comes back. I mean, again, it's all in the lap of the gods. I mean, the MOD might just slam the door in our face, and the whole, research into military development might just die. It might not go anywhere. But those three, issues remain. And like I say, we don't take no for an answer. We're not going to give up. We'll keep going.
Well, I know if anyone could do it, it could be you and Philip. So there you have it, you guys. I mean, there's the cream of the crop. So it's on Amazon, all right? Europe's Roswell, 40 years since impact. And it's under Markolly, Markolly. You'll also see pieces of this during the video, so you can see some evidence that they got, whatever Mark decides he wants in it. It's his show, so I just let him do what he wants. But I just want to let everyone out there know that Mark is awesome. You know that, Mark. And I am so grateful you're on my show, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Thank you. And there's some more bits. I was just plugging the book then. I was waving it at the camera.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Go get it.
Yay!
Yay!
All right, congratulations to you and Philip. Maybe he'll
Thank you very much.
Hey, maybe he'll like me this time.
Hey, well, listen, you're doing a subject that's incredibly close to his heart, so I do sincerely hope. I've grown my Santa beard, and it's the season to, make peace. So, Philip, if you're watching this one, get in touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And Mark, I
yeah.
look forward to us speaking in February about something completely different. But you never know. Maybe something extremely amazing, successful, out of this world will happen and we'll be talking about this. Who knows? I don't know.
Who knows?
I'm just really excited. Merry Christmas. Love to have you on always about so many different subjects. You're just incredibly intelligent. It just blows my mind. But this is really I've heard it all on this one.
And it's just a real pleasure at Christmas time to give you something that you
Oh
didn't
my
see
God, I'm
coming.
so excited. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody. Well, thank you for watching. And Mark will be on again in February or March. I can't remember, but something like that.
Next
So,
year. See you all on the other side.
yes. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Mark.